The United States of America, founded on July 4, 1776, is a place of democracy, free of any kings ruling over them. Many different groups of people came to experience what America had to offer for them. They came for different reasons, but one thing that everyone wanted was this: all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. America, for many, was a place of new beginnings, and a way to live with no discrimination. Sadly, this was not true, especially for the African Americans. They were denied their unalienable rights and discriminated against. They were constantly inferior in many ways to many people, and in the South, they were sold and treated as property. This discrimination did not stop even when they were fighting in the U.S. Army. The U.S. Armed Force was founded on June 14, 1775, with the creation of the U.S. Continental Army. During the Revolutionary War, African Americans were forbidden to join the Army, for fear they would revolt and kill their owners, even though they were fighting in the French and Indian War. One of George Washington's first acts as Commander-in-Chief was an order forbidding the recruitment of all blacks. The U.S. Army quickly changed the policy when they were low on manpower. Both sides said that if African Americans joined the Army, they would be free. The British kept their word, but the U.S. would not, mainly in the South. While the Army let African Americans join, it was again banned 20 years later, and they would not be able to join until 1863. Even the U.S. Marine Commander, William Ward Burroughs, had a racial policy in place that said, "You can make use of black and mulattoes while you recruit, but you cannot enlist them." This would last until 1942. The U.S. Civil War was a turning point for African Americans' rights in the military. African Americans were finally able to join the Army, but at first they were only used for labor jobs. Their pay was also different from the whites. Whites got $13 per month plus a clothing allowance of $3.50. This compared to the African Americans who got $10 a month with an optional deduction for clothing at $3. The military also separated the whites from the African Americans, having different platoons. The United States Colored Troop Regiment popped up all over the Union Army. Things were looking bad, but just under 100 years it would be completely different. World War II saw a huge number of African American soldiers, over 1 million. However, the U.S. military was still heavily segregated. The Marines had no black enlisted in the combat infantry. The Army had only 5 African American officers, and most of the soldiers tasked in the war were largely reserved for non-combatant units, though some served in all fields of services. There were still many segregated platoons during the war. The worst part of that was the Nazis were given more respect than the African Americans. Black soldiers had assignments give up their seats in trains to the Nazi German prisoners of war. This was all to change, though. In the summer of 1948, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially ending segregation and racial inequality in the military. Order 9981 states, "It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed service, without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. This policy shall be put into effect as rapidly as possible, having due regard to the time required to officiate any necessary changes without impairing efficiency or morale. With the last all-black units in the United States military abolished in September of 1954, African Americans could finally be treated equally to each other, after 173 years of discrimination and separation."